Hello, everybody, and welcome to Crushing Comics, where we're here with This Week in X. It's where Tyler, Fariha, and I talk about all of the X-Men comic books out this week, which happens to be the penultimate week of the X of Swords crossover. That means we are going to be talking about X-Force 14, Hellions number 6, and Cable issue number 6. So fair warning, we are going to go full spoilers. We're going to talk about everything in these issues, everything in the issues that led up to them, and probably some other things in the Marvel Universe and the complete and entire history of X-Men along the way. So you have been duly warned. And with that, let me welcome Tyler and Fariha. Tyler, let me ask you, since the theme this week is head-to-head competitions, would you rather put your pain tolerance on the line, or would you rather put your sick dance moves on the line if you had to choose one of those two competitions in the contest?
The question would be, would I want to inflict pain on myself or inflict pain on people watching me dance? I can't move.
So it would be like a torture for Peter and myself. Is like, watch Tyler dance. How long we can do it before it's like,
how long
no,
we can
stop!
endure it? Yeah. Like, you know, the top part will move and then the bottom part will move separately and non-rhythmically. So.
And Fariha, for your contest today, would you prefer to be in a contest of how much food you can consume, or would you prefer to be in a fashion contest?
Oh, it's always be fashion. Like, you know, I mean, it's not, I suck at both, but I feel like between eating and then walking the runway, I can get some moves on. Like, I learned some moves from my cat and see how she walks and everything. So I feel like I can probably pass on that.
On the catwalk.
Yeah. On the catwalk.
I don't know what I would choose.
I'll do better than Wolverine. I know that.
He just owned it. I don't know which one of the four I would choose out of these four. They're all things that I think I have a particular skill in. It kind of depends on what the eating contest is. Because if it was ice cream, there's no one on the planet Earth that can eat more ice cream in a shorter period of time than me. But otherwise, I might choose fashion. Okay, so before we get into these issues, we have a special surprise from Fariha that I was just surprised by a second ago as we were talking before he came on the air. So continuing from last week's discussion about Joshua Cassara's amazing art in last week's episode, and then he's also the artist in this week's episode, look what Fariha has to show us if you're on visual. Otherwise, Tyler can narrate what it is for those of you just listening.
So the thing is, last week I was like blown away by Josh Cassara's art in Wolverine 7, and through Tyler, I got in touch with him, and I got myself the original art of this amazing page of the fight between Summoner and Wolverine in the realms, which was the wordless page that was in Wolverine 7.
Gosh.
Yes, and
it is all like the different slices of reality, and they were kind of transforming as they go through.
Yes.
Yeah, and the chess pieces.
Exactly.
And Minecraft.
And
oh my gosh.
Cave drawing.
It's even better in person, and it's also completely inked. So it's just like missing the color. But to be honest, though, it's so much better to look at because all the line drawings are there. And it's just amazing.
You should also point out the snake right on top when you write Wolverine.
Oh, yes. Snake. Yes. Every Wolverine, like it says like Snick next to it when he's writing it. And this is also comes in like a Marvel approved page. So everything about this is just awesome. I got in touch with him, I think Thursday, and he sent it out. Sorry, Friday. He sent it out the same day, and it arrived yesterday.
I can't believe you have it already.
I have it already. And then not to just, he sent me the page. He also sent me this doodle that is like,
thank you card.
Smelly Wolverine for you.
Yeah, he did a smelly Wolverine for me. I was like, oh, that is so cute. So yeah, I mean, I am now the lucky winner or owner of that amazing page. So I mean, this is probably the most expensive piece of art I own.
Wow.
I do have a Miss Marvel original art, but that wasn't as expensive as this one. So I am kind of like freaking out about it. I actually just looked at it, and then because Lady Darkholme was very interested in the art as well.
That's Freya's
I had
cat,
to,
by the way. She's not talking about
yeah.
Mystique. Yeah.
No, that's my cat. So I had to kind of put this away in the closet so she can't get her hand on it. So I am just kind of waiting for the Christmas rush to be over to get it properly framed.
Awesome.
Yes.
Well, what a good reminder that like there are different ways of supporting your favorite Marvel artists, and especially if you see their work in a book. I mean, Freya's talking about paying premium for this one, but this is probably one of the one or two stunning pages in the book. You can often get in touch with people or figure out who their art dealer is, and if you really love a page, you'd be surprised. Sometimes you can own a piece of one of your favorite comic books for a lot less than you might think.
And I'll be telling you that the amount of details and everything that goes in it, the price was not that much compared, what it should have been. And so from that point of view, I didn't even feel like asking him, like, oh, is that the final price? I didn't, because I feel like that just would be not good.
Yeah. Well, look, we're going to do things ever so slightly differently this week, even though we want to get right into X-Force 14, which is the issue drawn by Josh Cassara, so natural tie-in. Unfortunately, we're not going to take that opportunity because X-Force 14 and Cable 6 this week are so tightly bound together in the way that they track all of the end of the contests in Otherworld that Hellions number 6 is kind of its own thing, even though it comes in the middle. So we are actually going to talk about Hellions number 6 first, and then we're going to come back and kind of talk about X-Force 14 and Cable number 6 as their own kind of merged thing. So Hellions, for those of you who've been listening and watching, we were utterly amused, fascinated, delighted by Hellions number 5, which is where Sinister took his intrepid team of Hellions through to the Otherworld. He gave up his beautiful plumage to King Jamie, as we've seen repeatedly, and he was trying to take them supposedly to try to get a sword from somebody, somewhere, to lessen the odds for the Arrako team and improve the odds for the Krakoa team. But we open up this issue not really in that circumstance. They pop out a Dryador, which is, of course, where Team Arrako is based. They've taken over Dryador. But there's really nobody there to be found bumming around with swords. They've already gone through their circle to the Citadel and have started the fight. The fight has been ongoing. The team finds out something else entirely, which begs the question, did Sinister ever think they were really going to steal any swords? Tyler, did Sinister ever think they were going to really steal any swords?
Well, it's Sinister, so hell no.
And Freya, like, do you think he ever really did he really think they were on that mission ever?
No, I mean, I don't know much about Sinister, but even I knew that was just a ruse. That was not, But the thing is, to that point, though, I mean, can I start my rant today now?
Oh, boy.
Sure.
Coming in hot. No, start the rant. Get us started. We're already on a totally different schedule than normal. Just go for it.
Okay. So, I mean, I was just saying that I was fuming at this issue because I'm like, why on earth I'm not reading about this journey?
Doesn't it seem more interesting?
Yeah, so much more interesting than whatever nonsense we were looking at in the other side of it. Like, I was just like, oh my God. Like, this week, I mean, last week, I was upset, and this week I will try to be positive. I feel like the most positive thing about this week was like, oh my God, one more week of this nonsense, and we're gonna go back to normal schedule. So that's my positivity of the week, And then this kind of shined a little bit better for me because I'm like, okay, at least something is up. Sinister's up to no good, and how this is going to kind of galvanize in like an upcoming docs or like X-Men world, like after the crossover. I'm super interested. But the thing is, everything that happened, how every character looks, I'm like, I want to read a whole arc dedicated to that.
I felt like there could have been at least like a middle issue. Look, I get we're in a crossover, and for a lot of people, this probably feels like the thing that's off to the side, and it is off to the side, and I understand that. But to see them kind of wearily pop through this gate, Nanny's got like a chip out of her egg, Havoc's lost an eye, as he sometimes does. I mean, they're just really looking rough, and I'm curious to know what their adventures have been, and while I know that's not the point of this, I think it just goes to show how effective Zeb Wells is in the storytelling, that he makes us actually care about what we missed here, even though it's really clearly non-critical. And also, again, Carmen Carnero on art, like the character models here are just wonderful. The faces are wonderful. David Curiel's colors are wonderful. And Tyler, I think you had a note too on the lettering even being wonderful, which we don't always call out.
That's true. I mean, I was pointing out in particular to the sarcasm of the word bubble, and then it just drips down like, it's basically, dripping with sarcasm.
Right, like a visual cue
Sarcasm,
other than doing something with the font that it's dripping with sarcasm, and it's clever.
Sarcasm,
and you don't see stuff like that too often, really.
No, not too often.
Not in Marvel, though. You do see that in DC.
You do?
Then other, yes, DC and then other like comic publisher. But in Marvel, it's actually they use like the font boldness to kind of say that, or like the word being bold to emphasize on words. But in other publishers, you kind of do see that. So it was kind of nice to see that being bleed into this.
Can I nitpick a little bit?
Yes, of course.
Well, it's not so much about the art. It's just that, it started off with like, Arrako and then Dreador Gate. And that is not the same thing that was in Creations. Because in the map in Creations, the link, the so-called gate between Dreador and Arrako is a rift. So it's Dreador Rift, not a Dreador Gate. So so it's a nitpick, but I feel like if you're going to publish something and it is crossover, people are going to notice things like that. And I just hope, I just kind of like wish that the editors would have paid a little bit more attention to small things like that.
I was a little puzzled by that. I was like, is the gate a Krakoa gate, or is it like an Arrako gate with the same kind of biological technology? And I kind of just breezed by it in my head because I was like, oh, right, there's funny things happening here. Yeah. But I was definitely a little puzzled by that. Yeah,
so basically I think it's meant to reflect like, the same thing as Krakoan Gate, but created by Arrako. But, they name it differently. And so I don't know. But this is the part which I kind of like, But talking about the art, right? Do you think that it looks a little bit rougher than the first Hellions issue that Camaro has drawn, or do you think it looks about the same?
I think it looks like maybe it's a little bit meant to have a faster tempo, and that in giving it a faster tempo, some of it's just not as glossy. I think the other one was kind of, it went with the joke more, that it was really polished up. And like, not to make excuses, maybe Carnero was just in a little bit of a hurry here, but there's definitely a few places where I felt like it was just meant to emphasize how quick and rough the action was unfolding. But I did notice some like a little bit less detail on some faces and bodies. But to me, the thing that usually matters is like that the action tracks. And I think in a lot of books like this, especially, nannies getting cracked as an egg, orphan makers getting pulled apart. I think in some action with this big of a team fighting, you would kind of lose the thread. And I was actually remember being really pleasantly surprised on the page turn after that I could still figure out where everybody was on the battlefield, which is, I think, a really specific skill to have as an artist. So even though I think it looked a little visually rougher, I think the choreography of it actually was outstandingly good. Yeah. I don't know. Am I just a Carvin Carnero fanboy? Like, do I think she does no wrong, or do you think it was well choreographed?
No, I think it is pretty well choreographed, and I think there were subtle cues, not so much to the action, but for example, Silkmane, you can see that she's rags and bones. They don't reference it like directly. But you can tell
there,
and you can tell that, of course, the hair is all down, and it's the same thing with Wild Child as well. I mean, you can see a little bit of the rib cage, so it's like, and somewhere along the line, I think Psylocke or someone mentioned that their supplies got stolen and they don't have much food left. So yeah, I mean, so in certain things, I think it was really, really well done.
Well, this fight that breaks out.
Could not differentiate.
You could.
I was just gonna say that. No, my eyeballs could not differentiate. I'm not blessed with detailed oriented eyeballs like yours, which is a curse, by the way. I'm an engineer.
It is a curse.
So.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a curse for you and a curse for us. I think we're all cursed.
Yeah.
So let's just talk about this, right? Like, I think something that we kind of occasionally lose sight of, both the three of us and the audience in general, is Arrako is all mutants. Tyler hasn't lost sight of it. Tyler makes sure to remind us every week. And so it's really, Dryador is where they're kind of passing through to get to Otherworld. So it's not unusual that there's just some mutants hanging out. I think what's unusual is this is the first time we've seen sort of what I would call the rank and file of the mutants from Arrako. These are not any special horsemen. They're not people that are kind of associated with the royal family or tending to the land. These are just some people they left behind to make trouble, or who might just be there on their own to make trouble.
No,
and
they are not Arrakos. They are not Arrakis, though.
Oh, what are they?
They are Amathians.
Okay, but they're from the Great Divide. They're from outside of Otherworld.
Yeah. So,
but they're from the Amenth side, not the Arrako side.
Correct.
Right. Still mutants, though.
And they're like the Hellions equivalent.
They mentioned, Tan, which is the leader, mentioned, I think it's in the write-up, the data page, mentioned that they are mutant Amethians, but it was never defined as in what is a mutant Amethian, because Amethians are demons, right? So are these the ones that sort of crossbreed, the crazy ones that crossbreed, or are they like natural mutation of the Amethians mutants? That is one thing. And then the other thing, of course, is like this sort of tracks a little bit with the Chimeras, because he actually changes their genes and modify them and sort of enhance them, but in a more Val way, I guess. That's why they call themselves the Locus Val.
Now, their characters, they have a cool data page. They're sketched, they're drawn very well. But in terms of understanding their whole jam and their motivation and their powers, they're really just here to take apart our team, more or less.
Yes, definitely.
But
remember that in I think in one of the issues, I can't remember which one, but they were talking about the Val are the ones that broke down the Arrako's resistance.
Yes. So they're definitely meant to be feared.
Yeah.
And very quickly, we lose two of the most charming members of the team here. Nanny's egg gets well and truly cracked in pure Humpty Dumpty fashion. And also, Orphan Maker is just pulled apart. And eventually, also, Wild Child winds up kind of sacrificing himself to cover the retreat through the gate. Sinister also gets caught and taken apart. But there's another Sinister that will be waiting when we get back to Krakoa. So the upshot of this battle is only Quanon and Psylocke of severely wounded Havoc, Scalp Hunter, and Empath even make it through. And part of that is the payoff of Empath having to relinquish his control of Scalp Hunter, resuming their vendetta.
So, to that point, it's all good and dandy. But the problem is, we haven't even spent enough time for us to even care, or me actually to even care about any of this. It just because we were just so involved in the sword fighting, which never happened. We were so involved in learning all these things that Tyler just talked about, or all the sword, where the weight of the sword and everything. So this was a thing that we were supposed to care, or supposed to happen, but there was no time spent on this for us to care, for us to care about any of this. Even that the one look at Quanon, I keep on wanting to say QAnon. It's really terrible, but
Quanon.
The Psylocke chick. Just one. She gave one look at the Wild Child, and that is a little sad, But the thing is, that just pretty much it, or the fact that because they are so deplorable, that's all we're supposed to care about. Is that the idea?
Well, go ahead, Tyler.
Go ahead. No, I actually do feel a little bit sad when Wild Child was like, I'll do my best and try and help you, even though he knows that he's going to die. And Quanon was just look back with some compassion, for Wild Child, whom I remember in an earlier issue of Hellions, she's like, well, I don't really care that he's following me around and things like that. So obviously things have changed a little bit.
And I felt like if I had that one issue where whatever happened between them, kind of was like presented, I would have cared a little bit more. But then, I did took a certain joy about Havoc losing his eye and then losing his hands later on, because he's really boring and he shoots all of this. So
Freya has it in for the Summers brothers.
Oh no!
all of
No,
them.
I know.
Except for the one that the crazy insane
Vulcan.
one.
Yeah.
Vulcan. Except
I
for
like him
Vulcan.
too.
He's insane.
We're
He's
in the
insane, and I like
extreme
him.
minority there. I've discovered it from X-Men canon. But you know what's really interesting about, I feel that. I can't dispute that we had time enough to see them, to care about them or not. And it's like, can any of us really say we cared about Nanny and Orphan Maker? I mean, they're such random characters. It's been more of a gag that they're back than anything else. But I feel like it also has made Nanny like more of a character, like an actual character instead of just a running gag. And I feel like they've really played up Orphan Maker as this like actual kid a little bit more, in such a way that it was a little bit more horrific to see him defeated than I've ever felt in the past. But what's really stood out to me is this is a very Suicide Squad sort of setup, right? We've got, Grey Crow, who I maybe have mistakenly said Scalp Hunter, but we're not calling them that anymore. Yeah. We have Grey Crow, and Psylocke, who are kind of like the Deadshot and the Harley Quinn, who are probably not going to die. And then there's people of like varying levels of comedy on the cast on the way down. Havoc is sort of the like, what's his name? Flag, who leads the team. It's very Suicide Squad equivalent. And part of the fun in Suicide Squad is they get killed all the darn time. Now, I think what's really interesting is the wild child sacrifice, because that's when, like Nanny and Orphan Maker, I felt myself thinking, well, so what if they get resurrected with personalities from other, other worlds? Like, who's to say? They were crazy to begin with, but like Wild Child, who has a lot of page time between Alpha Flight and Weapon X and stuff, was a moment where I was like, oh. And then I realized we were really down just to the core of characters who were from the Claremont era. And I was like, okay, this is really intentional, actually, the thing that Zeb Wills is doing to us right now. He's picking them off to see like how many can get picked off until we actually start caring, which I thought was really kind of clever.
And then what do you think about the way Scalp Hunter basically slash open Empath's like tummy?
Oh, I cheered out loud. I was here for it.
Same.
That is going to be that is a horrible way to die, because you don't die immediately, because like your guts will be like flowing out, and oh my god. And well, anyway, the four of them did not die in Otherworld.
They do make it back to kind of Avalon Gate Central. They're about to be kind of hunted down, and luckily Empath does something about it. And so I don't know if Empath, does he ever come? He does come through the gate.
He did.
So technically, Psylocke, Grey Crow, Havoc, and Empath made it through the other side, and they will get resurrected with memories, but they still die because the Sinister that lost the bet at the beginning of the last Hellions issue is there to basically, under the clouds, the literal clouds of subterfuge, assassinate them all and take the genetic material that Sinister sent back through, which seems like maybe it was Sinister's goal all along.
It does look like that way.
And then also, like, he kind of like, oh my god, my whole team is assassinated. I really like it. So that's one.
There's been a terrible attack.
Terrible attack. That is like, that last page is the reason that this week was salvageable to me, because I'm like, yes, at least something happening that we can look forward to after this this crossover is over, because this needs to be explained. This needs to be explored.
Is this? I mean, do you feel like this this manipulative, like calculative Sinister is the one Sinister that we sort of knew from the beginning? Like, he's truly terrifying in that sense, rather than playing up as a joke and creating clones of himself and talking about capes all the time.
I come and go on this, because I really think, as I've mentioned, I've read every Mr. Sinister appearance pretty recently, and he just went through a shift under Gillen in 2011, and we're never going back. Like he's always been arch. He's always been, a little bit ironic, even when he was scary. But I just think comedic Sinister is where we are now. I think the thing that's interesting is clearly this gives him a little bit more agency over the thing he was doing all along, whereas in the last Hellions issue, it kind of felt like he was grasping at straws. But I end this thinking, okay, he's got a plan, and like, he knows that if any of the four of them make it through the resurrection protocols, they're they have something to say. He didn't kill them on the other side of the gate.
Correct.
So like he's got a very limited amount of time to do something with this genetic material. And that I think shifts him a little bit more back towards plotting Sinister from just plain old funny Sinister.
But the thing is, this is the first time we see him by himself, though.
Yes.
So all this time it was an act.
Right.
It was probably an act, or probably whatever he was doing. Because the thing is, like, I personally think that makes him far more scarier than if it was just always plotting all the time. If there was no comedic side of him, because this was truly the first time he's by himself. Like
that's true.
So he doesn't have to act, which I often find to be like, writers often forget to do that. But this time around, it was actually done well. Like, there was even like a switch, like he takes a minute, then he's like resets himself and like, oh my God, my team's killed. Like, so I know that made this whole thing so scary. I was like, this is not good. And he's in the council.
Well, and we move forward with Hellions pretty much being my most anticipated X-Men book. I mean, it was nose to nose with the other books that were in my top group, like New Mutants and Marauders before this. And I am so ready for more Hellions. But does anybody have anything else they want to talk about on Hellions before we shift over to our big 2 issues of battles?
Initially, I was thinking that, is he, did he get the idea of chimeras from Tarn? Or did he have that in mind already? But then he got killed in there. So I don't
so that one's knowledge is lost theoretically.
So I don't know if it's lost or are they linked somehow.
Well, and also, I mean, we know that chimeras did come about in Life number 9, but that was with the benefit of having met up with the Horsemen. So yeah, it's kind of interesting, the inevitability of Sinister and Apocalypse and their crossover, right? Whether that's from Sinister's origins to the Age of Apocalypse to looking at how things rolled out in Life 9. Like Sinister, as much as he wants to think he's this self-made man who's controlling so much stuff, he kind of always winds up getting swept along in Apocalypse's wake.
Yeah. But even though I think in Life 9, they said that Sinister was under Apocalypse control or something like that.
Yeah, and they eventually, I believe, execute him after he creates.
No, they did not.
Revolt.
The machines did. Because I think
he's on the machine side briefly.
Yeah, and he betrayed them.
Oh, this
and then
is not a good plan.
No way.
Okay.
Yeah.
On to X-Force, and we're gonna just bleed into Cable. We'll try to demarcate when we've really moved on to Cable in the conversation, but just assume we're kind of doing them both. So X-Force picks up with Magic, quite amusingly, having a similar reaction to all of this than that we're having. And we're not going to kind of go scene by scene through this, but I just want to start with Magic herself is like, this is BS. I want to fight the honkin' dinosaur. And Saturnyne finally gives us all what we've all been wanting and gives us the thing we've predicted we would see Magic do this whole time, which is burst out of the inside of Poggerpod.
Except that it's not killing the alligator, but just like really, kicking the ass, the butt of this small creature that is the real Poggerpod.
Fariha, it's been a lot of Tyler and me going back and forth like Furbies the past couple of minutes. How are you feeling here at the top of X-Force?
She's like rolling her eyes.
Oh no.
Yes. Like, what Tyler said. Like, it's like, I mean, I was, like, Magic is me, I'm Magic. Like, it's like, we are one person in this. Like, it is like, how she was saying that, what is going on? This whole 2 issues, I'm like, okay, what? I could not keep track of who's getting points when, what are the rules, what are we doing here? And, I mean... this whole thing was one big who cares. Like, seriously. Like, one big who cares. Like,
I do think, from a graphic design standpoint, as much as I love Tom Muller's little score boxes, it needed to show motion in some. I spent a lot of time flipping back and forth to be like, who got that point? So who had what point before? Did they both get points? Did neither of them get points? It needed to show like something being scratched off or something being flipped over or something, because it actually wound up, I think, being more confusing as time went on than it was clever.
Thank God for the last page. Like,
but the last data page is in the last issue of this week's chapter. So you'll be like trying to figure out everything until you're like, oh, this chef came up like much earlier so that I don't have to figure this out by myself.
Well, I wasn't trying to figure out because I know you would figure it out and tell me. So I did not waste any time over there. I just kept on just going by. I was just mostly upset by the fact that there was no concrete rules. The rules could change at any moment for anyone, for whichever way the Saturnyne was feeling. And if I have to listen to one more time a very interesting woman, like very beautiful, very powerful, pine after some stupid, unnecessary Brian the human. And doing all of this, I'm going to shoot myself. Like, seriously, seriously, you're doing all of this for this idiot? Go pine after Wolverine. Go pine after Cyclops even. I'll give you that. Like, you're pining after this.
That's a question that I sort of asked too. So, but my question is more like, here she played up as in like, I'm pining for this man, but is that really what she's after? Like, is there something more? Like, because the Braddocks have been involved in the other world for a long, long time. So is there something unique about the Braddock genetics that she's after? Like, I mean, not like a Sinister or something like that, but but something else. Like maybe the Braddock has a particular hold over other world. Who knows? But but I agree. On the pitch itself, it does come off like that way.
But in that case, kidnap him, dissect him, take all his organs, do whatever it is that you need to do, but stop fucking saying that, oh my God, please, Brian. And Brian's like, I'm a married man with this useless girl that we never hear about.
Okay.
It's like, well, the whole thing was just like, oh, who cares?
Before we go deep into that race, like any other things that you guys want to talk about, or should we quickly run down the pages?
I do think we should kind of just lightning round some of these.
Okay. Sure.
I do. So I have two quick notes here. One is, I do hope that there's something more to this, because even in the annals of Excalibur Omnibus Volume 1 out this week, even I don't know that we've seen the obsession with Brian. Like, it's always been there and she always has been obsessed, but it feels like it's the only dialogue she gets to have right now, which is sort of like twisting me a little. That said, I think Cassara does a great job of making her not look like Emma Frost. And I really did appreciate that in this issue. I didn't have that whole like, Emma, is this Emma? What's going on? She really just looked like her own distinct character, which I really appreciate. Okay.
No, now she looks like magic.
I think that's just how he draws chins. I think he just draws chins in a certain way. But anyway.
Because this time around, like, oh, she doesn't look like Emma Frost. There's like a page of them, two of them in the same. I'm like, oh no, now they look like each other.
All right, here we go. Speed round through the contests. We have Captain Britain versus War in the dungeons and a battle of who can bear more pain. War is the winner. Do we think that is a predictable win for War?
Cable was involved in that too.
Yeah, he's somewhere in the background, but he's only Team Cable. If it was old Cable, he could have definitely endured the most.
I mean, because it's Brian the human, so of course War is the winner.
Yeah.
Keep going.
So the next one, the contest of boulders, which is rolling them up or down a hill somehow. It seems, and magic is the only one in the X-Men side. I love the visual gag.
The wrong Rasputin is in this competition. Let me just say that.
I love the visual gag and I love magic on the panel, but it's just it was just a gag. It was a gag panel.
Yeah,
it is. It could have been Captain Britain again. It could have been, anyway. And it's because unbeaten, so she'd figure it out somehow.
The only one who was like the other way. But that made me laugh so much.
But I was thinking, why can't she just summon a teleportation disc and then just teleport the boulder up to the top of the hill?
Maybe she.
Yeah, I thought that too. Or just use the momentum, like put the disc, have it go through, and then just have it.
And then good cover at the top.
And then roll down and like smack them all. Okay, so now we have battle underneath the waves between Iska the Unbeaten and the White Sword versus Gorgon. Gorgon, possibly the most useless one of this crew that you could send underwater. What is he gonna do underwater?
I don't know. And you can't really see too.
Right?
He's not blind. Right? He's not blind. He blindfold himself.
Oh, he blindfolds himself. Okay.
Because he turns anything he sees to stone. So,
yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Why didn't they send him for the boulder thing? Okay, that's just
Who knows? So now, again, by the way, the art on this whole page, amazing. The next one is the contest of
Eating
plates.
competition.
Redroot the Forest versus Cable versus Brian versus Cypher. And I do think of all of the people on both of these sides, I think Brian the Human having the biggest appetite does track for me. Even though Redroot tried to cheat and ruin it all.
Yeah, but in the report to Mojo, it says that Krakoa lost, even though
Yeah,
here
I was
Krakoa won.
confused.
So
On the
it's like,
points page,
No,
it says that they
because-
won.
yeah,
And they got the point.
But
yeah, they did.
the
Well,
spy is probably non-reliable, unreliable. Didn't know it. Left early, left early.
They
Oh,
left
this is
early.
boring. Yeah.
The Redroot changed everything to fertilizer, so Redroot is gonna win. Just gonna walk away.
Yeah, that's what happens when you leave
Exactly.
these things before the final count. So the next one is Lord of the Dance, Bay the Blood Moon, and War versus Cypher and Wolverine. I don't know how Cypher loses this. He's too adorable. I think
no idea.
Cypher should have been the winner here. And he did fare surprisingly well.
Yeah,
supposedly.
maybe
Just
Bay
very
won because
adorable.
she did a robotic dance that won.
Does it look like she's kind of doing the robot?
Yeah,
there? It kind of looks like there's like a although I hope this panel was purely there for the gag on the Mojo data page of Mojo saying that there could be a spin-off, like the implication that there's going to be
Yes.
Dancing with the Stars Mojo World. I hope that this was purely for that joke. And that there was no other reason for it being there.
I think half of this was because of that one data page.
I
So
do
you
think
could
so.
you could just get there.
That's true.
So then we have a wonderfully tangled labyrinth escape. Redroot and Pog versus Captain Avalon, Brian the Human, and Storm. Very, very
And
David
Redroot.
Bowie and Labyrinth, very MC Escher. And Arrako wins here too. I guess if Magic had been there, she could have won, but I can believe that Redroot has some, you kind of see in the art, Redroot's like trailing their roots and things around the labyrinth, so that's probably how they figured it out. So that's cute. I like when they're clever, when there's like a reason. I'm into it. Okay, moving on. Now there's a jigsaw battle between Death and War and Gorgon and Magic, and Krakoa does come up on top here, even though Gorgon theoretically is blindfolded.
Cannot see.
He can't see anything.
But the picture is a given. Is a green lagoon, and is that splash page in issue 9.
Oh, I was trying to make it out. I couldn't figure it out.
So Magic would have won because I think Magic was there or something like that. So she's like, "Oh, I knew what's happening. I recognize everyone."
Meme. Me and all of my friends were tested before going to this private island, right? And it's the Green Lagoon. Okay, so now we come to the one that actually has a little bit of a connection to last week, which is the contest of Couture between Redwood, the Forest and War, and Storm and Wolverine. And it makes the point that typically Storm could not possibly be beaten in it's Storm, but she's still drunk, and she's at a serious disadvantage throughout this issue because of the drinking that she did with Wolverine previously. And this is Saturnyne continuing to take her toll on them for plotting to kill her, because Saturnyne liked it as little as Fariha did.
Mm-hmm.
And Wolverine was like in bondage gears. She's
God.
like have wrap around stuff.
Walk that one way, Wolverine. Do it. Okay.
Yeah.
So now we come to the Blightspoke navigation, Iska the Unbeaten versus Cable and Magic. I would have actually liked to spend a page on this because the Cable and Magic dynamic has been really fun, and they were the ones that were in the dinner,
Testing
like
Iska.
going back and forth with Iska. So it feels like kind of like, why not pay that off here? It just felt weird. On the page turn, I kind of assumed that since we were still adjacent to Blightspoke in the Crooked Market, that it was going to like pay off the gag, but then it didn't.
No.
And
Iska did not even appear in the panel.
Yeah, although beautiful panel with all the
It
planets
is.
and stuff in the background.
Yeah.
Cassara just should do a Blightspoke book, I think is what we're coming away.
Well, to be
with
fair, is this done by him or is this done by the graphics, the special effects?
Yeah, a lot of times when people do space effects, this is a fun thing about comic books. Anything that has like nebula or space glow and stuff, a lot of times the colorist handles that almost entirely.
Yeah.
But Fariha could refer to her original page and tell us if Cassara inked in specific sky effects in the background or if it was the work of a colorist. Oh,
I will check that and report back.
he will report back.
Okay.
So now we come to
What
really
we will
the one that's the big one here, which is the foot race between Redroot, who's apparently old and slow. I kind of had trouble understanding what the issue was
Yeah.
here, and Brian, who's like, as Captain Britain, I would think this isn't a problem. But there's the added kind of unspoken rule of don't break anything or else you bought it. And
Yep.
so Redroot thinks that they've won, but they did some shattering of stuff along the way. But Brian also did some shattering of stuff
Yeah.
along the way. This to me was pretty fun, especially because the Furies come into it. It looked great. It gave us a little bit of room. I enjoyed this.
Yeah, I mean the thing that I immediately came into my mind was the tortoise and the hare race. So where I was like, being fast does not mean you will win, and then Redroot is just like strolling along slowly, and she won. But the other thing I kind of noted was that is Brian holding a piece of Betsy in her hand in the beginning?
Ooh, let's go. Computer enhance.
It's like a purple rose.
I think he is. He is for sure.
Right?
Because then Saturnyne even says, I know you're sad.
Yeah.
And yeah, good catch, Tyler. I, by the way, love this new Captain Britain as Captain Avalon costume. Totally dig it.
Well, how long is he going to stay as Captain Avalon? I think he's going to be like Captain, Coins or the Knight of Pentacles is like he has to repay everything that he broke. Even though to be fair, the furries did some damage too. So
Furies. I'm sorry.
Furies.
I really try not to interpret anybody's pronunciation here,
Furies.
but Furies and Fairies is an important difference to keep in mind.
Furies. Okay.
Okay, so now we come to the contest of letters. Right? That's next. Also the rumination endurance, where Wolverine.
No, don't forget.
What have I forgotten?
Don't forget the data page in the middle.
Well, I mean, we've kind of
Mojoverse.
been talking about it, but what do you think? So you're newer to this whole Mojoverse stuff. Like, does the joke play for you just based on having read X Factor? Because I think that's your only exposure to Mojoverse, right?
No, I mean, I read like on and off something about
Maybe
Mojoverse
X Factor, the
before.
old X Factor, like Peter David X Factor, maybe?
Statistics.
Oh, maybe an Ecstatics.
Statistics.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, statics. Yeah, that's a book I read. But the thing is that, no, I mean, one of the ones that really made me laugh, and it just because this is like a saddest joke in like entertainment industry about how women are treated, because Mojo says that in our version of the show, let's have Magic lose both times and become Pogga Park's love interest afterwards. I was like,
just getting that free commentary right on the page there.
Like, this is exactly how Hollywood, like, uses women, thinks about women and all of that. So it was like, it tracked very much from that point of view. Realism achieved, but, so that's the only thing that I wanted to talk about. And then everything else is whatever.
Well, I mean, it also turns out that the spy, the spy for Major Domo, which is like Quadius Core, is that Minotaur looking creature that appear in the free comic book issue and also in Creations, which was like reprinted there. And
editors,
then,
we love when you plan ahead.
Yeah. And then there's this part where Mojo said the Mojo's comment on Wolverine. That sounds a lot like one of the Claremont storyline that he was planning to write before he resigned from Uncanny X-Men.
That's actually really perceptive.
Interesting. Yeah, I was just also talking about like historical accuracy. I'm like, yeah, all the X-Men fan rejoiced at that. Just those two words side by side. Like, like every X-Men fan rejoiced.
Yeah, because I distinctively remember after he left and they had an interview in the Wizard magazine.
Yeah.
Claremont said something like, he's going to make Wolverine a villain.
And there's actually, I wish I knew the URL off the top of my head, but there's an amazing blog out there that it's called like the Forgotten Claremont or the Hidden Claremont or something, that's compiled all of the statements he's made in interviews and stuff about what he was planning to do, because he was originally planning to stay until Uncanny X-Men 300, that has like all of his plots, and some of the plots kind of got mined for pieces and used. Some of them he later would use in X-Men Forever, and then some of them just kind of never got used, and it's really interesting stuff. So now after that data page, we have kind of this side by side of one that's amusing, one that's sad. On the one side, we have the contest of letters, which is the spelling contest where Magic hilariously loses because she spells her name as Magic with a K when we were looking for Magic with a C or a C and a K. I don't know how Doug, who speaks every language, loses a spelling contest. Maybe he speaks languages fluently, but he's bad at spelling. I don't know how his power applies there. Then on the other side, we have the tragic half where Fariha, who's the big fan of Jason Aaron's Wolverine here, if Wolverine has to look at everybody he killed, that includes all of his children.
All of them.
Everyone.
All of them. Yeah, he killed all of them. I don't know whether it was because the children that made him cry, or it just like, just in general, like the sheer volume of it, and the fact that he's still has some decency left compared to the other guy who has who doesn't necessarily have any kind of connection to the people he's killing.
Right.
So
and who brings them back if he feels like it. Yeah.
Right. And then, by the way, I do want to say that one of the ugliest art I've ever seen is also in this page, and that comes from Josh Cassara, which was like the last panel of how Magic's eyes and her look. That is so ugly. Oh my god!
I kind of like how he draws her like a little bug-eyed. I don't know. There's something about it I kind of dig.
No. That's like, that looked like she was punched in the other eye.
Oh yeah, the closed eyes. You know what? It really looks like the art on Something Is Killing the Children from Boom Studios. I forget the name of the artist. It's a James Tynion book, but it looks exactly like that. And the main character is this younger woman with blonde hair. And it actually, I had this moment of like, what book am I reading? Great book. One of my favorite books of 2020, if you haven't read it. Fantastic.
Okay. I'll check that out. But the thing is, I was not interested.
They might be too bug-eyed for you though. Based on that. So look, we're going to just fly past these next two. There's Resisting Temptation, and Gorgon's ready to strip down and give the sirens a big old hug. And then we have
But what sirens? I don't see sirens. I only see like two rocks there.
Well,
so,
that's the thing.
we got to give the panels to what counts, which is an adorable kitten later on the page, which Captain Avalon / Britain refuses to kill, and of course War is just going to drop the kitten right into her little flaming head, and that's going to be it for the kitten.
Yeah, Fariha, Brian the human saved the kitten. What do you think?
I mean, no, he didn't save it. He was just like, anyone could do that. Anyone would do that. I mean, look at this kitten, how adorable it is. And it even goes, meow. I mean, I have a black cat. So, I mean, this was like, so I actually saw this on Josh Cassara's Twitter before I read it.
Yeah.
I was like, he was like, oh, the new champion. I was like, what is this?
He drew my cat.
So it's now going to... Yeah, you drew my cat, and the story is now going to be 10 out of 10. And then it was about like, oh, kill the kitten. I'm like, how dare you? How dare you? I mean, that kitten better be alive.
Well, I don't know. Arrako got the point.
No, I hate like balance.
And also, I think
it's maybe because he stopped.
It's with Merlin. So you don't know what Merlin is up to in his dungeon.
Oh, maybe he's like, I don't know, maybe he's torturing people by having the kitten, but the people can't touch and cuddle the kitten. That's how he's torturing people. Like, I'm trying to be hopeful here. But
okay. All right. So now let's get to the other main event here, which is Storm finally having her face off here against Death. And Storm's still a little bit drunk, still doesn't have her powers. And we're in the world that I personally found really interesting here, which is the kind of vampire world, and they're meant to have a duel. And I'll turn it over to the two of you about what you thought about Storm's climactic duel with Death here.
Fariha?
I mean, it was pretty well, very Storm-like, I thought. It's just like, even without her power, even without her, without her... being a little bit under the influence of alcohol, she still kind of got stuff done. But then also to that point, I feel like she's like kind of like, I've had it, and that's why she was like kind of okay with just the killing. So so okay with it, or is maybe it's not a human or a mutant, like, or like, you know, she doesn't have any connection to this. I don't know. I mean, that's one of the things I was like, is that like, is she being so ferocious that is a little out of character, or how is that? How am I supposed to read that?
Well, if I can put in a plug for our other show, our epic X-Men reread, we're starting out reading Claremont from the start, and we're a few issues into it now. And Fariha will definitely have some fun, I think, reading Storm's development from Uncanny X-Men, kind of like 150 through 220, because while she's not a heartless killer, it has been established that when it comes down to it, Storm will kill in a fair fight, which is, I think, why it felt so discordant that she potentially plotted with Wolverine to assassinate Saturnyne before. That didn't feel very Storm. To me, this felt very Storm.
And it tracks, it really echoes like 2 battles that she had before. And we will get to there, hopefully, in our reread. So I wouldn't spoil anything for you, Fariha. But this calls back 2 different battles for me. Like one, with her being, I'm not going to say anything, but basically, there's 2 different things here that echoes 2 different fights that she had.
And then also this was pure competence porn. So I was very much into it. It's like, it's like, it didn't matter she didn't have her power. It didn't matter she was under the influence of alcohol. She still was like effectively took this, other party down.
I agree with that.
Fed it to the zombies. I'm like, yeah.
and this actually makes the sword retrieval worth it.
It's the only one so far that has made the sword retrieval worth it for me.
Yep. Right. Because the sword comes into a major play here in her win.
Yeah, she shatters Death's sword, which was like, I did a double take. Like, did she really break his sword? It just felt like a cool payoff. And I was like, there's that vibranium sword coming through. Like, it really
It's unbreakable.
Off. Yeah.
It's unbreakable. That's what she says, right? Yeah. And I mean, I thought that was really, really well done, and it makes sense. But the other question I have is this: the card that Storm has was Death. I don't think it has ever been established that if she defeats Death, she becomes the new Death. Right?
Is she Death now?
Yeah. Or and then there's another panel of like Death nails kind of like pricking her hand when he try and bring her up. I don't know if it's just the art or if that has any significance.
Well, that brings us...
So now we have like what? Storm the teacher, Storm the thief, Storm the goddess, Storm the mom, Storm the now we have Storm the Death. My God, this girl, she has taken so many roles.
If we're gonna do the Storm as Death, I just need them to have Black Panther. Just give me a Storm and Black Panther one shot by Ta-Nehisi Coates, where we get to see, just let me have it. Please give me this one thing if Storm is gonna be Death. But that wraps up X-Force, and now we're on to Cable. Now there's a few marquee matches in Cable, but before we get there, we get a scene of a very abbreviated version of the council, because very few of them are there. Some of them are part of this battle. Some of them are presumably elsewhere doing who knows what. I don't know. But Sinister kind of continues here from the end of Hellions and is trying to spur them into action, while Kate and Emma and Shaw are kind of just sitting around along with a few other folks here. The council doesn't seem like they're being particularly effective, other than Jean, who's like single-handedly maintaining the link to Otherworld. Thoughts on this council scene?
First question is like, do they just sit around there all day? Like, is this like, what are they doing? Like, what is going on there? They're just sitting around.
Well, maybe not, because Nightcrawler did like buff in, right? So Nightcrawler was doing something else. But I mean, I think the thing that I was paying attention to was like, only one fraction of the Quiet Council is fully present. The rest of it has people missing. And the other thing also that sort of made me laugh a little was both Sinister and Emma dumping on Kitty's choice or Kate's choice of costume, because We will get to that in our reread. And you'll know why.
Well, so to be clear, the only truly missing people are the people who are involved in the actual battle, which is Apocalypse and Storm and Sinister, who's just come back, and then Jean, who's doing some sort of subterfuge and observation here. Yeah. So Sinister is, it's interesting because he's playing a couple of different notes here. He just got everything he wanted, kinda, in Hellions, but now he's also playing this note of like, we got to shut this down while we can, which I don't think is actually a really good plan, nor does he really know what's going on over there.
Mm-hmm.
But there's definitely this theme of like Sinister rising, which continues from Hellions, and that like maybe this next little period is going to involve Sinister's kind of counterinsurgency, even though he's already on the council. Because he's not being, of all of them, including Mystique, I think Sinister's the one who's like playing them the most right now.
Yeah. And he has something which I think none of the people know what he has. Which unfortunately made me go back and look at Fallen Angels again, because one of the line that Sinister spoke to Psylocke before handing Psylocke that genetic material box in Arrako is that you keep this safe while I keep your thing safe.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't remember what it was, but when I went back and take a look, it was a piece of epoch that is embedded in the machine. So, and I think that is the one thing that Sinister was keeping on behalf of Psylocke. I think the actual wording used was a piece of epoch echo in Psylocke's mind, and it's this little piece of machinery in the drawing. So.
See, kids, Fallen Angels might turn out to be relevant after all. So now we get to Cable versus Bay the Blood Moon. And this is young teen Cable, Babel as some of us call him. And it seems like he actually has the upper hand at a point, but he just can't go through with it. But then before he's killed, Doug intervenes and kind of stays Bade's executioner blade. And Saturnyne's point is like, you still lost because you lost something valuable, which was his belief in himself that he had this killer instinct. And it leads to this great moment of him kind of crying out for his mom and dad in Jean and Cyclops, which was
crying.
And actually crying. Fariha, what did you think about this little family vignette here?
I don't know much about Cable to actually know any of this, to understand where he was coming from and stuff, because I honestly thought that he was doing the right thing that is very X-Men-like by not killing new wife of his friend Cypher, or Doug. And so that's one of the reasons I was like, okay, so how is that kind of comes into him losing his killer instinct? I don't know. I mean, couldn't that both two things can be true?
Well, I think it can be true, but for me, my takeaway is more like this is the first time I think young Cable regrets killing old Cable, which he had so far been very certain that was the right thing to do. So to me, I think his journey of learning, which is what his card is, the Fool, is that his realization that whatever he has done before may not be the absolute right thing to do.
And our normal life, how every one of us learn that. We as young, you are dumb, and everything you do are dumb.
Well, I mean, I think it's a really good point that Tyler brings up, that it's not only an interesting beat for Cable, but it's an interesting beat for him as the Fool, right? The Fool's often on a precipice of deciding something. And if we're really good, and he actually makes a great comment in the ensuing conversation that like, maybe it would have been better to have the other guy, maybe it would have been better to have the old man version of him to do it. But maybe this is the moment that Cable actually fundamentally changes, maybe this is the precipice he was on and he could have just won that fight outright. But in losing the fight, maybe that's what matters, which I feel like I'm just re-saying what Tyler said, but it just worked for me. I think the balance of the tarot card as the hint and the moment of how shattered he feels, but like how uncable-like that is, together gave me a moment that I was like, well, this is a Cable issue, and we have been saying he's been underused. Way to make it like really count for him for a moment here.
So the thing is, like, do you think the older Cable would actually make the, like, you know, take the opportunity?
Oh, 100 out of 100 times the old Cable would take the opportunity. Without and then kill the next person and the next person.
I mean, at this point, right, should we mention how wonderful Nodo's art is?
He should be the only person who can legally draw Jean Grey. I know I say it every time, but like I want to pass a bylaw here on Crushing Comics that we will only from this point forward accept Jean Grey drawn by Nodo. But again, this is that slightly tighter Nodo, especially in the faces. And we thought maybe it was just because of that sci-fi arc, you know, was before, but then he actually drew kind of tight in the last issue that we saw him draw last week, and he's drawing kind of tight here. And it's just, I mean, I love him. I just love him.
Yeah. I agree completely.
I feel I'm running out of ways to say it. We've had 3 Nodo issues in like 4 weeks. He's just spectacular.
I know, yeah.
But then it ends that sequence with Jean taking control here, a kiss between Jean and Cyclops that to me was very reminiscent of their kiss in Uncanny X-Men 137. And then Jean, let's go fix it. Is Jean going to come through and be the hero of the whole crossover for me, one of the top Jean fans in the world? Quite possibly.
Well, there's also this other panel, which is a little bit strange because, 2 panels, right? One is Professor X says, Jean is ignoring me. And then the other thing is like, Jean has this pain. And then Cyclops asking her, is it Charles again? Jean did not reply him. So is it really because of Charles, or is she doing something else or influenced by something else?
Well, because there was that moment where she stared into the weird blackness in that Cable issue that came before this of all the stuff happening in space, where it's like, is she preventing other people from eavesdropping, or is she containing something within herself? I'm just ready, man. If I get Jean as a main character in Cable, I don't care what book it is. I just want Jean doing cool, interesting stuff. She can be the bad guy, the good guy. I don't care. I don't have a lot of judgments.
I have one provision. The word Phoenix cannot appear around Jean.
Luckily, Jason Aaron has that on lock right now in Avengers.
The Phoenix is happening elsewhere.
And Jean was already like, not my problem.
Yeah, thank God for that. Because, you know, as long as that's not happening, I am ready for it. I'm ready for something different. But the thing is also, I thought that it was very funny that the psychic connection works like a phone. Like, it's like, oh, I'm busy right now, call later. You know, and also like Professor X continuing on from his Claremont days, which now I can say that just bumping into people's head, like, hey,
Jean, up? Jean,
you up? Like, you know, which is not the best thing.
And then,
still continuing on.
Well, I really want him to do something to Saturnyne, and Saturnyne's like, snap her fingers, and like the whole thing get cut off.
As she does with Cable's surreptitious connections to Jean from this whole time.
Exactly.
So now we get a penultimate fight here, which is between the good old White Sword and Gorgon. And this kind of feels like what we came here for. Very similar to Wolverine versus Summoner. It's brutal. There's a clear cost. And it's, even though Gorgon's probably the character we care potentially the least about out of these 9 X-Men, it hurts to see Gorgon go down, even after evening score by killing a number of the 100 here.
The only complaint, or maybe it's not a complaint, maybe it was intentional. Did Gorgon basically just let White Sword stab him? At the end?
At the end. I think I kind of saw it almost as an echo of Hickman's moment with Apocalypse, and was it a younger Guthrie back in X-Men 7 in the Crucible, where it's like, you know, and he says, I walk my own path, you're not going to impose your will over me. And then to see that, it visually looks really, really similar to that moment. And I feel like it was meant to kind of echo like the die on your feet quality of that, but maybe that was just me.
Got it.
So the only reason I was kind of like, the fight was done awesome, and then this was actually like what we have been promised since like the whole crossover, the X of Swords. This is actually a sword fight and all of that. But also at the same time, we have him potentially dying, the least cared about X-Men in the whole team. Isn't that like a cheating? Like, you know, I mean, I don't know. There's still 3 more issues left. I don't know what gonna happen. But it's still one of those things. Like, who cares if Gorgon goes away and then comes back as whoever? Like, we don't know Gorgon the character, so.
We also have an out here. Basically, White Sword could bring him back as himself.
Yeah, that's true. It wasn't lost on me.
Yeah, that too.
I just think that the whole like otherworld resurrection mix-up plot, it's a really interesting gun on the mantle in the first act, right? And it's been looming over everything. We keep thinking this is the time. And even with Betsy, we don't know that she's dead. So has it happened yet? But there's like no, and of course some of the Hellions had it happen to them. But again, this core cast that we were so worried about, still not a thing for them. So I just think that, you know, there's 3 issues left. The only thing that's teased as being left here is kind of this like tiebreaker match between Annihilation and Apocalypse. But they're surely not going to be sword fighting, or let's hope, across 3 issues next week. So I still feel like somebody's going to die. Is it going to be Apocalypse? Is it in fact Gorgon? It just still feels like that's looming as a plot point over us. And we have 3 whole issues to see it come to fruition.
Mm-hmm.
But my problem is it's such a dumb plot point. That's what I'm saying. It's like, okay, what does it mean if they're going to come back as someone else? Like, because X-Men has, all these characters have gone through so many iterations. Every time a new writer comes in, it's literally a rebirth or literally doing something different that you can kind of connect back to. So what are we going to achieve from that? Like, I just don't understand the point, or what is it that the writer is trying to say. You know what I mean? Like, that's one of the reasons. And I think it's like a more bigger commentary on how comic book works. Like, it's just a constant reboot. So who cares? Well, that's my point. Like, it's like a double point. Like, first of all, no one important is dying. And second of all, if someone important does die, okay, so what? Like, you know, they're just like, and the thing, we know that when Hickman leaves or the next guy or gal or whoever comes around, you know, it's just gonna start over again. So, okay. I don't know. I mean, that's one of the reasons I was just kind of more upset about all of this unnecessarily, to be honest.
Well, I mean, it's not so much of like writers not paying attention to continuity here. Here, you know, the person being brought back may not have the same relationship with any of the other characters that has, you know, that has been established, right? So say, for example, if let's use someone that you know pretty well, pick a character that you know very well, Quentin Quill, for example. He dies in Otherworld and he comes back not as an asshole, but as a really compassionate, pink hair, cute boy. Like, you know, that is not a matter of like, you know, a writer coming on and doing something weird with the character and not caring about continuity. It is an actual change.
Right, but the thing is, to my point, there will be another story 10 years down the line, I can guarantee you. It's like, oh, wait, we found Quentin Quir's original soul in this little rock that we went and to this other timeline to find, and now he's back. You know what I mean? I mean, that's, I think it's more of a commentary of like how, like, you know, Marvel continuity have nothing matters, like nothing actually sticks, that I am talking about, rather than this actual gimmick.
Well, you know, I think
like this.
Yeah. I think that
nothing, because it will be reversed.
I think that you can choose to be cynical about all different parts of comic books, right? Like they're a trope-based medium, especially from Marvel and DC, and it's relatively rare to get something that really breaks ground from Marvel and DC, which is part of why people were excited for Hickman on X-Men, and part of why people love Al Ewing on Immortal Hulk, right? When Marvel or DC manages to do something groundbreaking on a book, it's cool. But you have to kind of decide how much of that cynicism is worth engaging with and how much of it is just inherent to the medium that we're reading, right? It's like saying that an episodic television show will have cliffhangers. Like, oh, I wish it didn't have cliffhangers. Well, it's an episodic TV show. And I know you know that, but I'm just trying to explore the kind of metatextual aspect of it, right? So for me, I get kind of annoyed with like whimsical stuff. I kind of like plot that moves. But that's me like fighting against the fact that comics like are inherently a whimsical medium a lot of the time. And it can't it's not always for adults, and it's not always meant to be, this dense story. In the same way that like we could get frustrated about any character death, we could get frustrated about any character consequences because they're so reversible. But at the same time, like that's what comics is. It's a reversible medium. No matter what anybody says is permanent, there's never been anything permanent except for Uncle Ben so far, and may he stay dead. So it's kind of like, do we get something interesting out of it along the way? And I try to look at the whimsical stuff that way too. And I think you saw me do that in this episode. Like, well, at least the art was good. At least it was a good gag. And so I just really, the way I feel about it is I'm holding that cynicism at bay that I feel you feeling and I'm feeling too. Because I'm like, but if something interesting happens because of it, even if it gets reversed 10 issues after this, it will have been worth all of this. But if it just misfires, or if it just gets fixed an issue later because Gene bippity boppity boos their backup back into their head, then I'm going to be retroactively angry. And it makes me think back in Excalibur 75 when, Brian comes back from the time stream and we lose Rachel to the time stream, which at the time was, spoilers for you, which at the time was crushing to me because I love Rachel Summers. And Brian came back wrong. And you were like, Rachel sacrificed herself for Brian to come back wrong? And like this, and it played out for a while. And I remember every month just feeling so conflicted, like, how dare they get rid of this character? I love to bring back a character that's messed up. And like, I still have that feeling like in my stomach today. And if they can make me feel like that with this, then it will have been worth it, even if somebody reverses it a few issues later. But if I don't get that feeling, then I'm going to come back and say, what was the point?
Right. And to be, maybe I'm just like being angry ahead of time, and then maybe next week I'll think a completely different thing because I don't know what's gonna happen. But the thing is, like, if it's like, sacrifice that actually matters and makes sense, then I completely agree. But if it's like, it's just gonna be another version, okay, like, a character can be another version for a while, and we know that that's gonna get reversed. So what are we getting? I don't know. And and you're 100% right. Like, it is a little bit of a tropey, but we'll have to see how it plays out.
So about seeing how it's. Oh, go ahead, Tyler. Before I wrap this up.
No, go ahead.
I was.
No, I was going to say before we end this episode, which has ran on pretty long. I just want to sort of refer back to one of the very first card that we saw, which was the Four of Wands card. The caption actually says something like, "As a family that has been fighting for eons has one final confrontation before they rest over the ashes of the defeated." And then the third caption that they say that they have built a hard home and one must dwell within. Like here, when you first read it, the one could be like, as a reference to, like, in general, the Arrako has to dwell in the heart realm. But what if they literally mean one, as in like Apocalypse or Genesis has to dwell within it? Because we are fast approaching the so-called final fight here, right? So just want to sort of like point out maybe the hint has been there all along, and we'll know the results of it.
And it feels like the tarot card stuff came early. Like the tarot card stuff has felt very consequential. They've been paid off really well. So of all the things in the plot, like it feels like they were probably part of the central conception of how this was all. I mean, it's called X of Swords. So maybe the payoff of the tarot cards, much as it was here with Cable and also with Doug and also with Storm, is going to actually be a good payoff. So let's just go final round here. This is our last chance to make a comment about this thing before we read the end of it next week. So Tyler, and then Fariha, and then I'll wrap it up. What are our feelings going into the final week here?
My main complaint, I think, someone has made it on has made the similar comment on the on one of our videos, is that it's a problem with pacing.
Yeah,
you padded a lot of things in the first half of this crossover, and then this second half felt a little bit rushed, a little bit squeezed, and so the subversive nature of this whole event did not quite hit the mark, because I'm all for being, you know, my expectation being subverted, but here it just felt kind of like off. There wasn't enough of a setup, even though we had such a long sword quest section, because it only happens in the beginning of creations or the two prelude issues. Like, there wasn't a setup that went further back. There wasn't something that has been seeded for a long time. And to be honest, a lot of these characters we don't really know them. Even on the hero side, you know, like Brian, like for someone who just jumped onto House of X and X-Men in House of X and Powers of 10, they do not know Brian too well. Right?
I'm raising my hand over here.
Yeah, Gorgon has basically appeared in a couple of panels.
Yeah, you have to have been reading Hickman, really, to know who Gorgon is.
So if you have not had that history, you wouldn't feel a lot for some of these events that have been happening.
Yeah. Fariha?
And I read Secret Warriors. I read all of Gorgon stuff, and I still didn't care. The one thing I want to mention is like final confrontation is between Genesis and Apocalypse. Genesis is not on their team, so this is disqualifying. I personally think, because she was not in the Arrako team. So why is she fighting in the end? And
well, she's on the team as Annihilation.
Yeah. She was part of the champions.
Golden Mask version of her is on the team.
Oh, in that case, disregard everything I said. That's one of the reasons I don't bring receipt. You guys bring receipt. But the thing is, like, you know, I kind of knew that this was all heading towards that. So I was like, yeah, okay, sure. So that's where I am at right now. I'm like, I need this to be over next week so we can move on to whatever things Sinister's up to. The fact that Kate has killed Shaw on her knuckle and then constantly wearing gloves, even in cable issues. Whatever Quiet Council gets up to, what is like Beast up to in X-Force. I'm all for going back to those and forget this whole X of Swords actually ever happened.
You know,
I don't know.
I think that comment,
something happens next 3 issues and blows my mind.
I think that comment's really in line with kind of where I am here. Look, I'm trying to get away from always having to like approach comics from negative sentiment. It's like this thing that we all really love. We're talking about it over an hour a week. We're all on, you know, Twitter and social media, other places talking about it. And it's like, read the ones that you like, be critical of the ones that you don't like, but just try to find some joy in it. And if you can't find some joy in it, like, why? And so I've been telling myself that a lot as I've been reading this, because it's actually had a lot of joy to be found, especially in the artwork. And I just don't feel like the story is like really there personally. But now that we're at this before the final moment, I feel like I kind of can see across it a little bit better. And I'm understanding that this is the X Office wanted to put together a fun standalone thing that kind of tied into some specific history, but it was going to be like an X-Men thing that was pick-upable by people in this new world of X-Men. Because if you look in the last like 8 years of X-Men, 10 years of X-Men, there's not a ton of standalone stuff that you can just pick up, partially because Ben just had his titles so intertwined, partially because after Secret Wars, there was the kind of known main thread. There's just not a lot of big X-Men books. And Hoxpox is its own thing. And I just see this as them trying to create something that's self-contained. So a lot of the silliness and a lot of the lack of the character stuff that matters to us in this moment might actually really come off great to all these people that we all personally know who are just going to buy this hardcover, having not read the 12 intervening issues. And it might work for them in ways that it never worked for us. So I kind of am in the same chord as Fariha of like, I'm really ready to get back to all the stuff that was happening before. And I've kind of just, and I think I've just come to the realization now in the second to last week, this was never going to be a Hoxpox sequel. This was never going to give us a lot of rewards. It's just going to give us a couple more breadcrumbs. And I think that maybe my expectation was just too high because of it following Hoxpox, but also because of how well Hickman did with Infinity on his Avengers run. But that was an all Hickman event. And if there's one thing that really works here is that the authors have done a really good job of all holding the line. I don't think that any one author here was a weak spot. We've had plenty of authors who I personally don't really like turn in great issues. We've had plenty of artists who are not my favorite artists turn in great great issues. And like, if we have a good self-contained story and the writers formed a gestalt and the art formed a gestalt, how low can we grade that, really? Even if it was disappointing to work week to week. So that's where I am on this. Trying to find the joy. And I think the joy is this is actually going to be a fun thing to hand to people who just want to have fun with X-Men a year or 2 or 5 years from now, compared to like the hot mess of something like Battle of the Atom or Apocalypse Wars.
Well, that is a really fair comment. And, you know, I mean, we shall see. Let's do a litmus test. Everyone pass this to some friend who is not an X-Men fan and say, read this and tell me how much you like it or don't like it.
I think it's going to be, even if the Sword Quest felt inconsequential to us in real time, I really think it's going to be a really fun popcorn read for people to just pick up who are like, I don't really know X-Men. What should I read? To be like, pick up X and Swords. But we'll see what happens next week. So look, that has been an ultimately pretty supersized episode of our This Week in X covering X of Swords. Next week's another 3 issues, and they're Hickman Howard issues, so who knows? We might need 10 episodes to get through the 3 issues next week. We might go line by line through the art. I can't even tell you what's going to happen until we read them. So until then, thank you so much to Tyler and Fariha, because when it comes to reading X-Men is what, Fariha?
X-Men is better when it's read together.
That's right. And so we're so happy to be reading it together, the 3 of us, but also with you. We love your comments so much, and you really make this fun for us. I wish you could see our group text and how much fun we have talking to each other about all the stuff that you say too. So whether you're listening on podcasts, whether you're watching on YouTube or some future holographic version of this, thank you so much. And this has been another episode of Crushing Comics. Be well.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.